The soil samples looked ordinary enough, but Amy Reed knew better than to trust appearances. She crouched beside the fallen tree, scraping another layer of dirt into her collection tube while keeping her movements slow and deliberate. 3 days on Caldris 7 had taught her that this moon didn't follow normal rules. Plants grew in impossible spirals, gravity shifted without warning in certain valleys, and the local wildlife had teeth in all the wrong places. Her portable scanner beeped softly as it analyzed the mineral content. Interesting. The readings showed trace elements that shouldn't exist together naturally. Amy made a note in her field journal, sketching the strange root formations that seemed to grow directly through solid rock. The research station back on the orbital platform would want detailed documentation of everything she found down here. Branch snapped somewhere behind her. Amy didn't turn around. Instead, she kept working, carefully sealing the soil sample and placing it in her collection pack. Forest moons like Caldris 7 were full of sounds. Wind moved through the canopy above, small creatures scurried through the undergrowth, and dead. Wood fell when it couldn't support its own weight anymore. She had learned long ago that every sound had a source, and most of those sources were harmless. But some weren't. She moved to the next sampling location, following the path her scanner had mapped out the day before. Her boots crunched softly on the carpet of fallen leaves. The trees here grew thick and tall, their branches weaving together so tightly that very little sunlight reached the ground. Amy had to use her headlamp even during what passed for daytime on this moon. Another sound. This time it was the soft whisper of something large moving through dense foliage. Amy continued her work, but now she paid attention to more than just soil samples. Her ears tracked every noise around her while her hands went through the familiar motions of scientific collection. Scrape, seal, label, pack, move forward, repeat. Anyone watching would see a dedicated researcher focused entirely on her job. But Amy was listening. The sounds had a pattern now. They came from roughly the same direction, always staying behind her position, matching her pace as she moved through the forest. Whatever was making them was following her route, staying parallel to her path but maintaining distance. It was being careful not to get too close. Smart, Amy knelt beside a cluster of crystalline formations that had grown around the base of an enormous tree. Her scanner went wild, detecting energy signatures that made no scientific sense. She documented everything carefully, taking photographs from multiple angles and collecting samples from different layers of the crystal growth. This discovery alone would justify the entire expedition. The following presence moved closer. She could feel eyes on her now. It was an old instinct, something left over from when her ancestors had been prey animals on a world full of things with claws and teeth. The feeling raised goosebumps along her arms and made her neck prickle with awareness. Something was hunting her. Amy sealed the last crystal sample and stood up slowly. She stretched her back, rolled her shoulders, and made a show of consulting her map. To anyone watching, she would appear completely unaware of danger. Just a scientist doing her job, absorbed in her research, oblivious to anything beyond her immediate work. But she was counting footsteps. The thing following her was large. Its feet made almost no sound when they touched the ground. But Amy's trained ears could pick up the soft displacement of leaves, the barely audible shift of weight from one step to the next. Whatever it was good at staying quiet. Very good. But not perfect. Nothing was perfect. Amy packed her equipment with the same methodical care she had shown all day. Every tool went into its designated place in her field pack. Every sample tube was secured in its protective foam housing. She moved like someone who had all the time in the world, someone completely unconcerned about anything beyond her immediate scientific objectives. The presence behind her grew bolder. She could almost feel its confidence increasing as it watched her seemingly oblivious behavior. It was getting ready to make a move. Amy finished packing and hefted her field pack onto her shoulders. She checked her handheld GPS unit, confirmed her next waypoint, and started walking deeper into the forest. Her pace remained steady and unhurried, just a researcher following her planned route, focused on reaching the next sampling location. Before the light faded completely, behind her, something large began to follow more closely. The path ahead led through a narrow valley between two ridgelines. Amy had scouted this route yesterday, noting the terrain features and identifying potential hazards. The valley floor was rocky and uneven, with plenty of places where someone could lose their footing if they weren't careful. Large boulders dotted the landscape, creating natural obstacles and blind spots, perfect for what she had in mind. Amy entered the valley, still maintaining her unhurried pace, Her boots found secure footing automatically while her eyes swept the terrain ahead. She was looking for specific landmarks now, features she had memorized during her reconnaissance. A particular boulder formation, a dead tree with distinctive branches, a patch of loose scree that would make noise when disturbed. The thing following her was getting excited. She could feel its anticipation building as it watched her walk into what it probably thought was a perfect killing ground. The valley walls would prevent escape to either side. The rocky terrain would slow her down if she tried to run. From its perspective, she was walking into a trap. Amy reached the first landmark and made a small adjustment to her course. To her follower, it would look like she was simply navigating around an obstacle. But Amy was positioning herself exactly where she needed to be for what came next. The presence behind her moved closer still. She could hear its breathing now, soft and controlled but definitely there. Whatever was following her was big enough that its lung capacity was several times larger than a human's. It was also disciplined enough to maintain steady, quiet breathing even while stalking prey. Impressive, but not impressive enough. Amy reached the second landmark and made another small course correction. She was now following a very specific path through the valley, one that would take her to a particular clearing she had identified during her scouting expedition. The clearing was surrounded by large boulders and had good sight lines in all directions. It was exactly the kind of place where a predator would expect to corner its prey, which made it exactly the kind of place Amy wanted to be. Behind her, the footsteps grew more confident. Her pursuer was no longer trying to maintain maximum stealth. It was positioning itself for a final approach, probably planning to close the distance quickly once she reached the clearing ahead. Amy smiled to herself and kept walking. The creature had been hunting for 3 cycles of the great moon, and in all that time it had never encountered prey quite like this small biped. Most creatures fled when they sensed his presence. Others fought desperately when cornered. A few tried to hide, though their fear scent always betrayed them in the end. This one simply continued working. The hunter crouched motionless behind a cluster of thick-trunked trees, watching the tiny figure move methodically through the forest. It carried strange tools and spent long periods crouched beside various plants and rock formations, apparently absorbed in some incomprehensible task. The creature showed no signs of awareness that death stalked it through the shadows. Perfect. Thrall, hunter's species, the Scarveth, had elevated the art of the hunt to a religious practice. They did not simply kill for food or territory like lesser predators. They hunted for the pure joy of demonstrating their superiority over all other forms of life. Every successful hunt proved once again that the Scarveth stood at the apex of creation. This particular hunt would be especially satisfying. The small biped belonged to a species the Scarveth had encountered only recently. They called themselves humans, and they had spread across several worlds with surprising speed. Most galactic species had dismissed them as insignificant, but the hunter had studied their behavior patterns and found them intriguing. Humans were small, slow, and physically weak compared to most sentient species. They had no natural weapons, beyond small teeth and soft claws. Their senses were limited, their reflexes adequate at best. By all logical measurements, they should have remained confined to their home world, easy prey for any predator species that discovered them. Yet somehow, they had developed technology that allowed them to travel between stars. Somehow they had established colonies on dozens of worlds. The hunter found this contradiction fascinating and had requested permission to study human behavior through a proper hunt. The tiny figure ahead stopped beside another tree and began using its tools again. The hunter could smell no fear from it, detect no elevated heart rate or stress hormones. Either this human was remarkably calm in the face of danger, or it truly had no idea what was approaching through the forest behind it. The hunter suspected the latter. Humans were known to become completely absorbed in their work, focusing on immediate tasks while ignoring everything else around them. This one appeared to be following that pattern perfectly, making it ideal prey for a ceremonial hunt. The hunter began to move closer. Each step was placed with absolute precision. His feet found solid ground that would make no sound when his weight settled onto it. His body moved through the dense foliage without disturbing a single branch or leaf. He had practiced this approach for decades, perfecting the art of silent movement until he could walk within arm's reach of prey without being detected. The human continued its mysterious activities, apparently unaware that death now stalked it. From less than 30 meters away, the hunter paused to study his prey more carefully. The human was smaller than most adults of its species, with long dark hair tied back in a simple arrangement. It wore practical clothing, suitable for forest travel, and carried a pack filled with various tools and containers. Everything about its appearance suggested a researcher or scientist of some kind. Interesting. The hunter had killed warriors, merchants, and colonists, but never a human scientist. He wondered if this one would behave differently when it finally realized its situation. The human finished whatever it was doing and stood up. It stretched its back and shoulders with casual movements that showed no tension or awareness of danger. Then it consulted a small device, probably some kind of navigation tool, before shouldering its pack and walking deeper into the forest. The hunter followed. This was the perfect hunting ground for his purposes. The forest was dense enough to provide excellent concealment, but open enough to allow freedom of movement. The terrain ahead led through a narrow valley that would limit the human's escape options when the final phase of the hunt began. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. The hunter increased his pace slightly, closing the distance between himself and his prey. The human's walking speed was predictably slow, forcing him to move more carefully to avoid getting too close too soon. The proper timing of a ceremonial hunt was crucial. The prey must be allowed to sense danger gradually, building fear and desperation before the inevitable conclusion. But this human showed no signs of building fear. It simply walked through the forest at the same steady pace, occasionally stopping to examine something with its tools before continuing on its chosen path. Its behavior was almost mechanical in its consistency. The hunter began to wonder if humans were capable of sensing danger at all. Perhaps their species had evolved in an environment so safe that they had lost the instincts that kept other creatures alive in hostile territory. That would explain their apparent fearlessness in situations where any sensible being would be terrified. It would also make them remarkably easy to hunt. The hunter allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he contemplated the hunt's inevitable conclusion. He would take his time with this one, allowing it to finally understand its situation before ending its life quickly and cleanly. The human's strange tools and research materials would make interesting trophies to display alongside his other hunting victories. The human entered the valley ahead, still walking at that same unhurried pace. The hunter smiled, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. The valley was perfect for his purposes. High walls on either side would prevent escape, while the rocky terrain would slow down any desperate flight attempts. His prey had just walked into the ideal killing ground. He began to close the distance more aggressively now, no longer concerned about maintaining maximum stealth. The hunt was entering its final phase, and soon this strange little creature would discover what it meant to face a true apex predator. The human continued walking, apparently oblivious to the death that stalked ever closer through the shadows behind it. It moved between large boulders and navigated around fallen logs with the same methodical precision it had shown throughout the day. The hunter found himself impressed by the human's focus and determination, even in the face of approaching doom. Most prey animals would have sensed something by now and begun showing signs of distress. This one simply continued pursuing its incomprehensible scientific objectives. It would almost be a shame to kill something so dedicated to its work. Almost. The hunter drew within 50 meters of his target and prepared for the traditional warning phase of a ceremonial hunt. Soon he would announce his presence, allowing the prey a few moments to understand its situation before the killing began. It was an important part of the ritual, demonstrating the hunter's confidence in his inevitable victory. The human stopped walking. Without turning around, it spoke clearly into the forest silence. Amy's words hung in the forest air like smoke after gunfire. She stood perfectly still, facing away from the creature that had been following her for the past 2 hours, letting her statement sink in. Behind her, she could hear the sudden absence of sound that meant something very large had frozen in complete shock. Good. She had its attention now. Amy reached into her field pack and pulled out a protein bar. She unwrapped it slowly and took a bite, chewing thoughtfully while she waited. The wrapper crinkled softly in the silence. Somewhere behind her, the creature was probably trying to figure out how a small human had detected its presence when much larger and more dangerous prey had never managed the same feat. She took another bite of the protein bar and spoke again, still without turning around. "I know you're there. I can hear your breathing from here. You have impressive stealth for something your size, but you're not dealing with a prey species anymore." The silence behind her deepened. Amy could practically feel the creature's confusion radiating through the forest. It had probably never been detected during a hunt before. Never had its carefully practiced stealth techniques called out so casually by something it considered food. Amy finished her protein bar and crumpled the wrapper, tucking it into a side pocket of her pack. Leave no trace was more than just a camping principle when you were working on an alien world. She shouldered her pack again and began walking toward the clearing ahead. "I'll give you 3 more steps before I turn around. After that, this stops being your hunt." Behind her, she heard a soft intake of breath that might have been surprise or anger. Probably both. The creature was clearly intelligent enough to understand human speech, which meant it was also intelligent enough to recognize a challenge when it heard one. The question was whether it would be smart enough to back down or arrogant enough to continue. Amy had a pretty good idea which option it would choose. She walked slowly through the rocky terrain, counting her steps and listening carefully to the sounds behind her. The creature was struggling with its decision. She could hear the subtle shifts in its position as it fought between the urge to accept her challenge and the nagging suspicion that something wasn't quite right about this situation. Amy reached the edge of the clearing and stopped. This was the spot she had scouted yesterday, a roughly circular open area surrounded by large boulders and fallen trees. Multiple escape routes led away in different directions, but more importantly, the space gave her room to maneuver and excellent sight lines in all directions. Behind her, something large took a deliberate step forward. The sound was different, this time. Instead of the carefully silent footfalls she had been tracking all afternoon, this step was intentionally loud. The creature was making a statement, letting her know that it had accepted her challenge and intended to continue the hunt. 1 step. Amy set her field pack down beside a convenient boulder and began going through it with the same methodical care she had shown all day. But instead of reaching for soil sampling equipment, her hands found items that belonged to a very different kind of field work. The second step came a few seconds later, another deliberately loud footfall that echoed off the surrounding rock formations. The creature was trying to intimidate her now, using its size and strength to project menace across the distance between them. 2 steps. Amy's hands moved through her pack with practiced efficiency. Most of the scientific equipment went to one side, still within easy reach but no longer her primary concern. Other items came out in their place, tools that looked nothing like the instruments a xenobiologist would normally carry into the field. The third step was the loudest yet, accompanied by what might have been a low growl of satisfaction. The creature thought it had won some kind of psychological victory. It probably believed that its show of determination had broken her nerve, that she would now try to run or beg for mercy like proper prey. 3 steps. Amy stood up and turned around. Her face was completely calm as she studied the creature that had been stalking her through the forest. It was even larger than she had estimated, standing nearly 8 feet tall on powerful legs that ended in clawed feet. Its body was covered in dark scales that would provide excellent camouflage in deep forest shadows. Muscular arms ended in hands that could easily tear a human apart, and its elongated head was filled with teeth designed for ripping flesh. Impressive. But not nearly as impressive as it thought it was. Wrong choice, Amy said quietly. The creature's head tilted slightly as it studied her. It was probably wondering why she showed no signs of fear, why she wasn't running or screaming or doing any of the things prey animals normally did when confronted by an apex predator. Its eyes were intelligent and calculating as they took in every detail of her appearance and posture. Amy smiled, and the creature took an involuntary step backward. It was a predator's smile, cold and confident, and completely without fear. The creature suddenly realized that something fundamental had changed in the past few seconds. The small human it had been hunting was still standing in the same spot, but somehow everything about the situation felt different now. Amy reached behind the boulder, where she had placed her pack, and withdrew something that made the creature's eyes widen in recognition. The weapon in her hands was clearly of human manufacture, but it was nothing like the primitive tools she had been using for her scientific work. This was purpose-built for killing, designed by a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of making things dead. The creature started to move, probably intending to close the distance before she could bring the weapon to bear. But Amy was no longer where she had been standing a moment before. Somehow, impossibly, the small human had simply vanished from sight. The creature spun around, searching frantically for any sign of its former prey. The clearing looked exactly the same as it had seconds before, but Amy was nowhere to be seen. She had disappeared as completely as if she had never existed. A voice spoke from somewhere among the rocks, calm and conversational. Lesson 1 about humans. We didn't get to the top of our food chain by being prey. The creature turned toward the sound, but there was nothing to see except empty air and silent stone. It began to understand that the situation had changed in ways it didn't fully comprehend. Somehow the hunt had become something else entirely. Another voice came from a completely different direction, or maybe it was the same voice using some kind of technology to project sound. The creature couldn't tell. You're probably wondering how I knew you were there. The answer is simple. You're good at moving quietly, but you're not perfect. And on my world, anything that isn't perfect gets eaten by something that is. The creature crouched low, all its senses straining to locate the source of the voice. Its excellent hearing picked up nothing but the natural sounds of the forest. Its enhanced vision detected no movement among the rocks and shadows. Even its sense of smell, far superior to that of most species, gave it no clue about the humans' current location. It was as if Amy had become part of the landscape itself. You made 2 mistakes. Her voice continued from yet another impossible location. First, you assumed that small and weak meant helpless. Second, you assumed that I was actually alone out here. The creature's head snapped up as it suddenly realized what those words might mean. If this human wasn't alone, if there were others of her species hidden somewhere in the forest, then the hunt had become something far more dangerous than a simple predator-prey encounter. Amy's laugh echoed off the surrounding rocks, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Don't worry, I am alone. But you see, that's the thing about humans. We don't need a pack to be dangerous. Every single one of us is the end result of 4 billion years of evolution on a world that tried very hard to kill us. We learned to hunt things bigger and faster and stronger than we were. We learned to kill things that should have been able to kill us. The creature began to back toward the edge of the clearing, finally understanding that it had made a terrible mistake. This was no longer a hunt. It had become something else entirely, something the creature had no experience with and no preparation for. We learned, Amy's voice said from the shadows, that the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't look like a predator at all. The Scarveth hunter had survived on a dozen different worlds by trusting his instincts, and right now every instinct was screaming at him to run. But running meant admitting defeat, and no member of his species had ever fled from prey as small and seemingly helpless as a human. He forced himself to remain calm and think logically about the situation. The human had surprised him, yes, but she was still just one small biped armed with primitive weapons. He had size, strength, speed, and natural armor on his side. More importantly, he had experience hunting dangerous prey across multiple star systems. The hunter began to move in a wide circle around the clearing, using the larger boulders for cover while he searched for any sign of his target. His enhanced vision swept every shadow, every possible hiding place where something human-sized might conceal itself. She had to be somewhere close by. A small pebble struck the ground near his feet. The hunter spun toward the source of the sound, but saw nothing except empty rock and scattered debris. His ears strained for any follow-up noise that might give away the human's position. Instead, he heard her voice again, coming from somewhere behind him. "You're thinking like a predator from a normal world. That's your first problem." He turned, again claws extended and ready for combat. Nothing. The human's voice seemed to bounce off the surrounding rocks, making it impossible to determine her actual location. "My species evolved on a world where almost everything was trying to kill us. We had predators that could tear through metal with their claws. We had pack hunters that could track a scent trail across continents. We had flying things with venom that could drop a creature your size in seconds." Another pebble landed near the hunter's position, this time from a completely different direction. He realized she was deliberately making noise to confuse him, using the acoustics of the rocky terrain to mask her true location while keeping him off balance. Clever, but not clever enough. The hunter activated his enhanced hearing, filtering out background noise to focus on more subtle sounds. There. The faint scrape of fabric against stone, coming from somewhere among the boulders to his left. He began moving in that direction, placing each step carefully to avoid making unnecessary noise. "And you know what we learned from all those predators?" Amy's voice continued conversationally. "We learned that every single one of them had weaknesses. The big ones were slow, the fast ones were fragile, the armored ones were clumsy, the smart ones were overconfident." The hunter paused. That last comment felt uncomfortably personal. He resumed his careful advance toward the source of the sound he had detected. His vision swept the area methodically, looking for any hint of movement or anything out of place among the natural rock formations. A sharp pain lanced through his left leg. The hunter looked down to see a small metal dart protruding from his thigh, its tip buried deep enough to penetrate his natural armor. He pulled it free with his claws, noting the strange chemical smell that clung to the projectile. Some kind of primitive poison, probably. "That's a mild paralytic agent," Amy's voice informed him helpfully. "It won't kill you, but it will slow you down considerably over the next few minutes. I could have used something lethal, but where would be the fun in that?" The hunter felt a tingling sensation spreading outward from the injection site. His left leg was already beginning to feel heavy and unresponsive. This was not going according to plan. He forced himself to keep moving, though his gait was becoming noticeably uneven. The human was playing games with him, demonstrating her ability to strike without being seen. It was a psychological tactic designed to erode his confidence and make him doubt his abilities. It was working. "Your species hunts for sport," Amy continued, from her invisible position. "You track down creatures you consider inferior and kill them to prove your superiority. It's almost quaint, really. Like a ritual dance that never changes." Another dart hit the hunter in his right shoulder. This one carried a different chemical payload, one that made his vision blur slightly at the edges. He was being systematically weakened, turned into a more manageable opponent through the careful application of chemical warfare. The hunter tried to charge toward the area where he thought the second dart had originated, but his coordination was off and he stumbled against a boulder instead. His enhanced reflexes were becoming sluggish as the foreign chemicals spread through his bloodstream. "My species hunts for survival," Amy said, and now her voice sounded closer, though he still couldn't see her. "We track things that are faster than us until they collapse from exhaustion. We study things that are stronger than us until we find their weak points. We outlast things that should have killed us because we're too stubborn to lie down and die." A third dart struck him in the back, right between his shoulder blades where his claws couldn't reach to remove it. The hunter felt his legs beginning to shake as the accumulated chemicals affected his nervous system. He was losing control of his own body, becoming helpless in ways he had never experienced before. "You hunt because you enjoy the feeling of power over weaker creatures," Amy continued. "We hunt because we had to learn how or we would have gone extinct. There's a difference between hunting for pleasure and hunting for survival. The difference is that one of them teaches you to be efficient." The hunter collapsed to his knees, no longer able to support his own weight. His vision was darkening at the edges and his breathing was becoming labored. Whatever chemicals the human had used were far more sophisticated than anything he had encountered before. Through his fading awareness, he heard footsteps approaching across the rocky ground. Soft, careful steps that made almost no sound even, when he was listening for them specifically. The human had been moving around the clearing all this time, positioning herself for precise shots, while remaining completely undetectable. Amy stepped into his field of view, and the hunter finally got a good look at his tormentor. She was exactly as small and apparently fragile as he had thought, but there was something in her eyes that made him understand why his instincts had been screaming warnings. Those were not the eyes of prey. The darts contain a cocktail of compounds that will keep you immobilized but conscious, she explained in the same conversational tone she had been using throughout their encounter. "I need you awake for what comes next." She knelt down beside him, close enough that he could have reached out and torn her apart if his muscles had been responding properly. Instead, he could only watch helplessly as she examined the darts she had used to bring him down. "These are designed for studying dangerous wildlife without causing permanent harm," Amy continued. "Though I suppose from your perspective, I'm the dangerous wildlife in this scenario." The hunter tried to speak, to demand an explanation or threaten revenge, but his vocal cords were as paralyzed as the rest of his body. He could only listen as the human continued her lecture. "Your species has been hunting humans for recreational purposes," she said, and there was something cold and dangerous in her voice now. 3 colonies have reported Scarveth hunting parties in the past year. 12 confirmed deaths, probably. More that haven't been discovered yet. The hunter's eyes widened slightly. She knew about the other hunts. Somehow this small human scientist had access to information about activities that were supposed to be secret from the galactic community. "That stops now," Amy said simply, "and you're going to help me make sure it stops." The cave system stretched deeper into the mountainside than the hunter had expected. Amy had moved him here after the paralytic agents wore off enough for him to walk, though his coordination was still compromised, and his reactions remained sluggish. She had made it clear that attempting to escape would result in more darts, this time loaded with compounds that would be far less pleasant than the ones she had already used. The hunter found himself oddly grateful for her restraint. A lesser predator would have simply killed him once he was helpless. Instead, she had treated his injuries, provided him with water, and even shared some of her food supplies while waiting for him to recover enough to travel. It was behavior that made no sense according to everything he knew about predator-prey dynamics. "Sit there," Amy instructed, pointing to a flat rock formation near the back of the cave. "Don't try to run. These tunnels go on for kilometers and I know every passage. You don't." The hunter settled onto the indicated rock and watched as Amy unpacked various items from her field kit. She moved with the same methodical precision he had observed during her scientific work, but now he understood that the appearance of distracted focus had been completely deliberate. She had known he was following her from the very beginning. "You're wondering why you're still alive," Amy said without looking up from her preparations. "The answer is simple. Dead hunters can't deliver messages." She activated some kind of communication device, a piece of human technology that looked far more advanced than the simple research equipment she had been carrying earlier. The hunter realized that her entire scientific expedition had been an elaborate deception, a trap designed specifically to capture a Scarveth hunting party. "My real name is Amy Reed, and I do have a doctorate in xenobiology from Earth Central University," she continued as she adjusted settings on the communication array. "But my actual job title is Interspecies Threat Assessment Specialist, Colonial Defense Corps. I've been tracking your people's hunting activities for the past 18 months. The hunter felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cave's cool temperature. Colonial Defense Corps meant military, which meant this entire encounter had been a military operation disguised as scientific research. His people had walked into a trap set by human soldiers who understood exactly what they were dealing with. 12 confirmed kills across 3 colony worlds, Amy said, reading from a handheld device. The victims include 2 teenage children, an elderly couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, and a pregnant woman who was 6 months along. Your people don't discriminate much when it comes to selecting prey, do they? The hunter tried to speak but found his voice still weak from the chemical agents. He managed a hoarse whisper. Honorable hunts, worthy prey. Amy looked at him for the first time since entering the cave, and the expression on her face made him wish he had remained silent. Honorable, she repeated quietly. A 16-year-old girl named Lucy who was collecting botanical samples for her school project. Tell me about the honor in hunting a child who had never held a weapon in her life. The hunter had no answer for that. Among his people, the concept of honor in hunting was tied to the demonstration of superior predatory skills. The specific characteristics of individual prey were irrelevant as long as they belonged to a species considered suitable for ceremonial hunts. Or maybe you'd like to explain the honor in stalking an 80-year-old man who needed a walking stick to get around. Amy continued. I'm sure that was a real challenge for a trained Scarveth hunter. She turned back to her communication equipment, making final adjustments to the array. The hunter realized she was preparing to contact someone, probably other members of the Colonial Defense Corps. His capture would lead to wider consequences for his people, possibly including military retaliation against Scarveth hunting grounds. I could kill you, Amy said conversationally as she worked. It would be easy. One more dart loaded with the right compounds and you'd never wake up. No one would ever know what happened to you. Your hunting party would assume you had been killed by local wildlife or fallen into a ravine. The hunter found his voice, though it was still weak and raspy. Why don't you? Because killing you would be the easy solution, and humans don't always take the easy way out when there's a better option available. Amy finished her preparations and turned to face him fully. I'm going to let you live because you're going to carry a message back to your people. She activated the communication array, and the hunter heard the distinctive sound of an interstellar transmission connecting. Whoever Amy was contacting was very far away, probably on another world entirely. Control, this is Reed. Target acquired and contained. Ready for Phase 2. A voice crackled through the communication system, distorted by the vast distance but clearly human. Copy that, Reed. Authorization confirmed. You are cleared to proceed with message protocol. Amy nodded to herself and picked up another device, this one equipped with some kind of recording apparatus. This is going to be broadcast to every major Scarveth settlement in known space, she told the hunter. Your government, your military, leaders, your hunting lodges, everyone, they're all going to see this. She activated the recording device and spoke directly into it, her voice clear and professional. I am Amy Reed, representing the Colonial Defense Corps on behalf of all human settlements in this sector. I am speaking to the leadership of the Scarveth Confederation regarding your species' practice of hunting human civilians for recreational purposes. The hunter watched in growing horror as he realized the scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about stopping his individual hunting party. This was a formal diplomatic message that would be received by the highest levels of Scarveth government. Effective immediately, all human colony worlds are designated as restricted hunting grounds. Any Scarveth vessels found in human space will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. Any Scarveth individuals found on human worlds will be detained and prosecuted under Colonial Defense Corps military law. Amy paused the recording and looked at the hunter. This is where you come in. I need you to explain to them exactly why this policy is now in effect. She reactivated the recording device and gestured for him to speak. The hunter found himself staring into the recording apparatus, knowing that his words would be transmitted across space to reach every important Scarveth leader. I am, he began, then had to stop and clear his throat. His voice was stronger now, but the words were difficult to form. I am a hunter of the Crimson Spear Lodge. I came to this world to pursue what I believed was easy prey. The hunter looked at Amy, who nodded encouragingly for him to continue. I was wrong, he said simply. Humans are not prey. They are predators, who have learned to appear as prey. They are more dangerous than any species we have encountered because they do not hunt for glory or ceremony. They hunt for survival, and they have become very good at it. Amy stopped the recording and made some adjustments to the transmission system. "There's more," she told him. "You're going to explain to them exactly what will happen if any more hunting parties target human civilians." She reactivated the system, and the hunter found himself speaking words he never thought he would say. "Do not hunt humans," he said, looking directly into the recording device. "They are not what they appear to be. They are not weak or helpless or suitable for ceremonial hunts. They are the apex predators of their homeworld, and they have brought those skills to the stars with them." The hunter paused, remembering the feeling of helplessness as the paralytic agents had taken effect, the complete inability to detect Amy's presence, even when she was moving around him in the open. "If you hunt them, they will hunt you back. And they are better at it than we are." Amy ended the recording and began preparing the message for transmission. "This is going out on all frequencies to every Scarveth world we know about. Your people will receive it within the next few hours." She looked at the hunter one final time, and he saw something in her expression that might have been compassion mixed with steel-hard determination. "You're going home now," she told him. "You're going to tell them everything that happened here. You're going to make sure they understand that human colonies are off-limits for hunting expeditions from now on. And if I ever hear about another Scarveth hunting party targeting human civilians, I won't bother with warnings or messages or diplomatic solutions." Amy's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but every word carried absolute conviction. "I'll hunt down every member of your species who thinks humans make suitable prey, and I'll show them exactly what it feels like to be on the wrong end of a predator-prey relationship." The hunter believed her completely,